Okay, so for the first 3 weeks of the Iran war, the objective was pretty straightforward: leadership decapitation. But in week 4, from March 21st to the 30th, the entire logic of the conflict just changed. The war entered a new and, honestly, a much more destructive phase. Let's break down exactly what happened.
Right, so the goal was no longer surgical. It pivoted from taking out Iran's leaders to, well, taking on Iran itself. The new objective was something called civilizational attrition. Basically, a systematic campaign to dismantle the country's ability to even function as a modern industrial state. This wasn't just about winning the current fight. It was about crippling Iran's capacity to wage any kind of major war in the future.
So what does this new attrition doctrine actually look like on the ground? Well, the coalition shifted its focus to the very heart of Iran's war machine, its ability to actually design, build, and deploy its own weapons.
Now, what's really telling here is the new target list. On March 21st, sure, strikes hit IRGC headquarters, but the real signal was the reported killing of Brigadier General Saeed Agha Jani. And this is a huge deal because, as the commander of the IRGC's drone program, Iran's most effective weapon, by far, taking him out was a massive blow to their operational capability. Then just a few days later, strikes hit a key smuggling route in the Caspian Sea, cutting off a weapons supply line from Russia. The squeeze was on.
And if you want to understand the sheer scale of this air campaign, just look at this number: 13,000. By the end of week 4, that's how many different targets the coalition had hit. This was an overwhelming air assault that also took out about 80% of Iran's air defenses, which basically gave the coalition free rein over the skies.
At the exact same time, there was another war unfolding. And this one wasn't being fought with bombs, but with barrels of oil and global finance. The battleground? The Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical energy choke point.
To really get what happens next, we need to quickly talk about the petrodollar system. You see, for decades, pretty much all global oil has been priced and traded in US dollars. This system is a massive pillar of American financial power, and it's exactly what Iran decided to attack.
And this is where it gets really interesting. On March 26th, Iran basically set up a toll booth in the Strait of Hormuz. They started demanding payment for passage in Chinese yuan. Now, this wasn't just about raising money for the war. This was a direct shot at the US-led financial system, using China's currency to try and create a bypass around the dollar.
This really breaks down the chess match that was going on. You have the US and Israel focused on physically reopening the strait, freedom of navigation, and protecting the dollar. But Iran was playing a different game. They were aiming for a soft closure, just enough control to enforce their new yuan-based tolls on some ships while blocking their enemies. It was this high-stakes game of economic chicken, playing out in the most important waterway on the planet.
But all of this high-level strategy, this clinical doctrine of civilizational attrition, well, it had a real, devastating, and immediate cost on the ground. And that human and political cost was starting to pile up, not just in Iran, but thousands of miles away, too.
And one of the most tragic statistics to come out of this week was this one. An estimated 15% of all casualties in the war were under the age of 18. This was a direct consequence of the new attrition strategy, which now included military and industrial sites that were often located right next to or even inside residential areas, schools, and other civilian centers.
And the targeting just kept getting broader. Over 30 universities were hit, including the Iran University of Science and Technology, which was severely damaged. Strikes also targeted internal security forces, like Baji bases in police command buildings in crowded cities, which was clearly an attempt to weaken the regime's control over its own people. And then reports started to emerge of so-called double-tap airstrikes, where a second strike targets the emergency responders who rush in to help after the first attack. And this immense pressure, it wasn't just contained within Iran's borders. The shockwaves were now hitting hard, thousands of miles away, right inside the United States.
And that brings us to March 28th, and this number, 8 million. That's the estimated number of people who took part in the No Kings protests, making it the largest single-day protest in the history of the United States. The escalating war abroad had now ignited a massive political crisis for the Trump administration right at home.
So, by the end of the week, a new and very difficult reality had set in. On one hand, the coalition could systematically tear apart Iran's industrial and military infrastructure, but on the other, Iran proved it could impose incredible costs on the global economy and on U.S. domestic politics. What you had was a strategic stalemate.
And right in the middle of this deadlock, we saw the first real sign of a diplomatic off-ramp.
On March 27th, facing that unprecedented political pressure at home, President Trump announced a 10-day pause on strikes against Iran's energy infrastructure, saying that talks were going very well.
And this quote really just nails the essence of Week 4. The conflict was no longer about a quick, decisive victory. It had become a brutal contest of endurance. It was a war defined purely by who could take the most pain, and the calculation was now about who was going to blink first.
Which leaves us with the critical question, right? After a week of such brutal, all-out attrition, is this pause a genuine path to peace? Or is it just a tactical reload before the next, maybe even more devastating round begins?